Greetings friends, you are watching the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we will take a detailed look at the current situation on the Ukrainian front as of December 24, 2025. Over the past 24 hours, a large number of truly significant events have taken place, so let us move straight to the analysis. The information flow today is extremely dense. We begin with the Zaporizhzhia direction, where units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation continue both active assault operations in the area of the settlement of Huliai Pole and the expansion of a bridgehead on the Ukrainian side of the Hychul River. According to reports from several pro-Russian analysts and experts, nearly all available reserves have been redeployed to this direction in recent days, in an effort to stabilize the front line and prevent a breakthrough of the defensive line constructed along the Hychul River. It is reported that the Ukrainian side has transferred both media-visible and non-media assault regiments, as well as separate assault battalions, to this area. Their task is to stabilize the situation and attempt to push Russian units back across the Hychul River. As of now, no open-source video evidence of the first Ukrainian counterattacks has been published. However, with a high degree of probability, such footage will begin to appear in the near future, as the Ukrainian formations are rapidly running out of time. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense and the command of the East Group of Forces report that Russian units have significantly improved their tactical positions in the area of the settlement of Zarekne. This is already the third settlement on the Ukrainian side of the Hychul River to come under Russian control. Video evidence demonstrating the course of combat operations in this area has appeared in open sources. Overall, the operational situation in the northern section of the T-0516 highway, as well as along the northern bank of the Hychul River, slightly south of Pokrovsk, is developing extremely unfavorably for units of the armed forces of Ukraine. This is how the changes on the combat map have appeared since December 13th. In fact, in just 10 days of active offensive operations, the Ukrainian defensive line in this sector has collapsed, at least in the northern segment of the so-called Zaporizhzhia Wall. That is, the fortified defensive line. This is precisely how the map has transformed in this area over the given period. The active phase of the offensive began approximately on December 14-15, when it was officially announced that the first settlement on this side of the Hychul River, Pishchane, had come under the control of Russian units. From that point on, events began to unfold according to a domino effect, rolling over the entire section of the front like an avalanche. Almost daily, the map was adjusted in favor of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. One settlement after another, one strong point after another, passed under the control of units from the East Group of Forces. This was exactly the operational picture we observed just yesterday, on December 23rd, when advances by Russian forces were reported in the area of the settlement of Andreevka. At the same time, video materials were published showing combat operations, as well as numerous episodes featuring Russian flags. As early as the morning of December 24th, information began to emerge about further advances by Russian units directly within the settlement of Zarekne. Thus, we can see that despite the redeployment of significant reinforcements, Russian forces continue to steadily approach the settlements of Ternovate and Kosovtsev. This is regularly reported by information channels affiliated with the East Group of Forces, emphasizing that the Russian army is methodically closing in on these locations. Most likely, in the very near future, a so-called micro-general battle will unfold for Ternovate. It is evident that the defense of this settlement will be an extremely difficult task. The Ukrainian side is transferring reserves of truly massive scale to this area, fully understanding that the outcome of the fighting for Ternovate may determine the fate of the entire remaining part of the Zaporizhzhia region, all the way to the city of Zaporizhzhia itself, including the city of Orikhiv. For this reason, extremely intense fighting is expected in this sector of the front in the coming days. Next, we move on to the Costantinivvka direction, from which a large number of significant reports are also coming in. Over the past several days, the Russian army has been conducting an active offensive here, employing dozens of armored vehicles, including tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. Assault operations are simultaneously unfolding on at least 3 sections of the front. According to sources, the main offensive efforts are concentrated in the areas of the H32 and H20 highways. Fighting is underway for control of their intersection for the northern shore of the Kleban Beek Reservoir, as well as for the settlement of Stepanivka. Over the past few days, the combat map in this area has undergone substantial changes. As we have discussed before, the objective is fairly clear: to straighten the front line between Stepanivka, Bereztok, and the southern part of the city of Costantinivvka. At present, extremely heavy fighting is taking place here, with the Russian army actively employing significant forces and assets. The tactic of using small diversionary and reconnaissance groups, whose task was to infiltrate Ukrainian defensive formations in order to disrupt logistics and combat formations, has effectively been abandoned in the Kostiantinivka area. Instead, Russian units have returned to classic mechanized assaults with the massed use of armored vehicles. Strikes are being carried out against populated areas, and advances are made along routes that have been cleared in advance. Accordingly, the Ukrainian side is meeting these mechanized columns with hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles. However, over the years of the special military operation and the conflict as a whole, Russian engineers appear to have developed additional protective elements for armored vehicles. Judging by the published footage, destroying or even merely stopping a single tank or armored vehicle often requires the use of 20, and sometimes up to 30 FPV drones. On individual video recordings, this picture may not always be immediately obvious. However, when speaking about the new offensive along the Toretsk-Kostiantinivka line, these conclusions become apparent. Footage published by the 28th Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine shows Ukrainian drones delivering dozens of strikes against Russian equipment that appears to be largely unaffected by FPV drone pressure. The columns continue moving along the Toretsk-Kostiantinivka highway despite hundreds of attacks. If we return to the map, it is worth noting the following detail. The first geolocated strike against Russian equipment was recorded in the area of a mine near Toretsk along the T-05-16 highway. In effect, under continuous drone strikes, Russian units were able to advance approximately 15 to 20 kilometers and most likely establish a foothold in the southern part of Kostiantinivka, landing assault troops. Part of the group apparently shifted westward, toward the area of the Agricultural Technical College located in the southernmost part of the city. It is possible that the main fighting is currently unfolding precisely in this sector. The objective of this maneuver is quite clear. From these positions, Russian units will attempt to establish fire or physical control over the key H20 and H32 highways, leading southwest toward the settlement of Bereztok. In effect, an attempt is being made to cut Bereztok off from Kostiantinivka, significantly limiting its logistical capabilities. The Ukrainian side has turned Bereztok into a powerful fortified area, and it is highly likely that extremely heavy and prolonged fighting still lies ahead for control of this location. In addition, reports today indicate the start of yet another offensive phase by the Russian army. According to several pro-Russian cartographic resources, a breakthrough is currently underway in the eastern part of the city. Russian units are attempting to establish a foothold specifically in this sector of Kostiantinivka, and then further develop the bridgehead from multiple directions: east, south, and southwest, from the areas of Stepanivka and Bereztok. Fighting in this sector is extremely fierce, while the Russian army continues to advance methodically. Next, we move to the Civk direction. Today, for the first time since the fighting for Civk began, the Ukrainian General Staff officially acknowledged that under pressure from Russian units, Ukrainian forces were forced to withdraw from the territory of the city of Civk. Further changes in the operational situation have been recorded in this area. This is how the maps have transformed over the past several days. The Russian army is conducting an active offensive here, and this information is confirmed by all cartographic services, without exception. Pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian, and neutral alike. Russian units are entering operational depth and continuing their advance toward Rye-Oleksandrivka, as well as toward the Sloviansk thermal power plant. At the current stage, this facility is regarded as one of the key objectives of the offensive. Perhaps still a distant one, but nevertheless the main objective of this phase of operations. On the Kupansk sector of the front, a minor adjustment has been recorded and published by neutral cartographic resources. According to their data, the Ukrainian side continued counter-offensive actions, but this time north of the city of Kupiansk, in the areas of the settlements of Doroshyivka and Zapadne. As a result of a series of localized counterattacks, Ukrainian formations managed to partially consolidate their positions and possibly disrupt logistical routes to a certain extent. This adjustment represents an important signal. Its significance lies in the fact that for the past 3 and possibly even 4 days, almost no new information has been coming from Kupiansk itself. The Ukrainian side launched its counteroffensive in early December, and for several weeks the map changed almost daily, either in favor of the so-called grey zone or in favor of the armed forces of Ukraine. However, around December 21st, these changes stopped. Today is December 24th, and there is still no new data coming from Kupiansk. It is difficult to say with certainty what exactly this pause is connected to. However, it can be stated with a high degree of confidence that Ukrainian units failed to push Russian forces from the western bank of the Oskil River to the eastern bank. Apparently, the Russian army managed to hold this bridgehead. At present, it appears that the Ukrainian side has become noticeably exhausted after prolonged and grueling fighting for this settlement, which lasted for about a month. These are indeed important developments, as they provide the Russian side with a certain window of time for regrouping, recovery, and preparation for further actions. It cannot be ruled out that counterattacks by the Russian army may follow in the near future. Next, we move to the Sumy direction, toward the settlement of Hrabovske. This is a new section of the front that was opened by the Russian army quite recently. Today, information emerged from pro-Ukrainian cartographic sources confirming that Russian units did indeed enter the territory of the settlement of Hrabovske and improved their positions in this area. The Ukrainian army was forced to retreat westward, toward the settlements of Ryazne and Krasnopilya. Reserves are gradually being pulled into this sector as well. Now we move on to a review of political developments. In the Kremlin, the Ukrainian version will be perceived either as mockery or as a deliberate provocation. This is how experts are assessing yet another peace plan presented by the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky. What exactly does this document contain, and why can it not be considered a realistic basis for resolving the Ukrainian crisis? On Wednesday, Ukrainian media outlets published Kiev's so-called peace plan, consisting of 20 points. Earlier, Volodymyr Zelensky had handed this document over to the American side during recent negotiations. Among its key provisions are the reaffirmation of Ukraine's sovereignty, a non-aggression agreement between Russia and Ukraine with international monitoring along the line of contact, as well as security guarantees from the United States, NATO, and European countries, modeled on Article 5 of the NATO Charter. A separate clause in the document fixes the size of the armed forces of Ukraine at 800,000 personnel. For reference, prior to the start of the special military operation, the Ukrainian army numbered approximately 240,000 troops. The sixth point of the plan envisages Russia committing to non-aggression obligations toward Ukraine and European countries. In addition, the document provides for Ukraine's future accession to the European Union, the allocation of a so-called global assistance package, and the creation of a national reconstruction fund totaling $800 billion. Ukraine also declares its readiness to formalize its non-nuclear status, accelerate the conclusion of a free trade agreement with the United States, and introduce educational programs aimed at promoting understanding and tolerance toward different cultures, as well as eliminating racism and bias. In addition, the plan includes language about an attempt to reach an agreement on the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, guarantees of freedom of navigation on the Dnipro River, the demilitarization of the Kinburn Spit, and a prisoner exchange under the formula all for all. Oversight of compliance with the agreement is proposed to be entrusted to a peace council chaired by US President Donald Trump. According to the document, once the agreement is approved, a ceasefire regime should come into effect immediately. At the same time, issues related to territorial claims and the presence of Ukrainian forces in Donbass failed to reach consensus between Kyiv and Washington. The Ukrainian side refused to withdraw troops from territories it currently controls in the region. Separately, Zelensky's office commits to holding presidential elections as soon as possible after the signing of the agreement. Russian authorities have previously noted that a number of provisions in this plan directly contradict Moscow's position. In particular, Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov stated that new initiatives from Europe and Kiev hinder the achievement of a long-term and sustainable agreement. He has also repeatedly emphasized that, from Russia's perspective, the United States and other participants in the process must adhere to the agreements reached during the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in Anchorage, Alaska, in August of this year. Following that summit, the sides agreed on the necessity of Ukraine having a neutral, non-aligned, and non-nuclear status. During the Results of the Year program held late last week, Vladimir Putin stated that Moscow is ready for peace negotiations. According to him, Russia seeks to resolve the conflict by eliminating its root causes. At the same time, the president noted that the main obstacle to peace remains the position of the official Kyiv authorities, who show no readiness to discuss the fundamental provisions of a potential peace agreement. As experts emphasize, the peace plan published by Kyiv is a draft document that is absolutely unacceptable to the Russian side. We should start with the fundamental issue. The 14th point proposes fixing the border along the current line of contact in Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson regions. With a high degree of probability, Moscow will not even consider such a proposal, since the residents of these regions voted in referendums in 2022 to join the Russian Federation, explained political analyst Vladimir Skachko, a commentator for the outlet Ukraina. Moreover, according to him, even raising the issue of dividing these territories could fall under a criminal statute concerning public calls to violate Russia's territorial integrity. There can be no talk of dividing historical regions in principle. Therefore, Zelensky's formula, "we stand where we stand," is meaningless and empty, the expert stressed. He also recalled that Russian units are currently present, among other places, in Kharkiv and Sumy regions. However, judging by the content of the draft document, Zelensky is unwilling to accept the realities on the ground. At the same time, Moscow has repeatedly urged Kyiv to take the actual situation on the battlefield into account and to conduct negotiations based on current realities. In addition, the document completely lacks provisions concerning the protection of the Russian language and Russian-speaking population in territories controlled by Kyiv, as well as any rejection of discrimination against them. Zelensky's intention to maintain an army of 800,000 personnel also raises serious questions. According to the expert, it is difficult to imagine where Kyiv plans to find tens of billions of dollars to implement this idea. However, even the concept of such a massive army is, in his view, absolutely unacceptable for Moscow. Overall, among all 20 points of the plan, there are no provisions concerning the demilitarization of Ukraine, despite the fact that these objectives were among the key reasons the war began. That brings us to the end, dear friends. Thank you to everyone who watches our channel. Subscribe, support us with likes. All the best to you and see you again soon.